Welcome to the technical briefing on the Comprehensive Asset Management Plan. Bienvenue à la séance technique sur le plan global de gestion des immobilisations. My name is Kina. I will be your moderator today. Je serai votre modératrice aujourd'hui. Before the presentation begins, we will be hearing remarks from Deputy Mayor Laura Dudas. Following the Deputy Mayor's remarks, we will hear from Tammy Rose, General Manager, Infrastructure and Water Services, who will then introduce the presenters. After the presentation, Deputy Mayor Dudas will moderate a question and answer session with members of councils and their representatives. Avant la présentation, la mairesse adjointe Dudas prononcera quelques mots et elle sera suivie par Tammy Rose, directrice générale, service des infrastructures et de l'eau. Après la présentation, la mairesse adjointe Dudas animera une session de questions et réponses pour les conseillers et leurs représentants. 5 minutes after the end of the update and 15 minutes after the end of the update, a question and answer session will take place for the media. Media wishing to participate can email medias@ottawa.ca for registration information. My apologies, it's actually going to be 5 minutes. I thought we were talking about another session. Before I pass things over to Deputy Mayor Dudas, I'd like to go over a few items. So during the presentation, please turn off your video cameras to allow for the interpreters and the presenters to have priority on the screen. Lors de la présentation, nous demanderons à tous les participants d'éteindre leur caméra vidéo pour permettre aux interprètes et présentateurs d'avoir priorité. Veuillez noter que la présentation est disponible en français sur la page YouTube de la Ville d'Ottawa. So I'll now pass things over to Deputy Mayor Dudas. Je cède maintenant la place à la mairesse adjointe Dudas.
Merci, Kina. Thank you, Kina. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I would like to start first by recognizing that Ottawa is built on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land, and the City of Ottawa honors the peoples and lands of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The city honors all First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. I would like to welcome my council colleagues, members of the Comprehensive Asset Management Steering Committee, city staff, as well as the media. Merci de vous joindre à nous à l'occasion de cette séance d'information technique virtuelle. Today, staff are going to provide an overview of a report going to the Finance and Economic Development Committee on Tuesday, April 5th, and to Council on Wednesday, April 13th. Staff have developed asset management plans for drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and transportation. This report marks the first phase of the city's journey to ensure that our asset management approach is consistent with the province of Ontario's mandatory regulation for municipal asset planning. The Provincial Regulations sets out a phased approach that requires council approve preliminary plans for core assets by July 1st, 2022. Preliminary plans for all other assets will be brought to council for approval in 2024. And in 2025, council will receive updated plans for all assets. But beyond the need to meet that timeline, these plans will provide us with information to support long-term planning and investment decisions. The world is a very different place now than it was when council first approved the Comprehensive Asset Management Plan program in 2012. What we need from our infrastructure is continuously changing in the context of climate change, active transportation, and our growing city. These asset management plans will allow staff to account for these changing contexts. Today, city staff, je m'excuse, mon chien. Today, city staff will provide you with an overview of the next steps in our asset management journey and how this information will help inform council in the decision-making process in many years to come. To introduce the presentation, I will now hand it over to Tammy Rose, General Manager of the Infrastructure and Water Services.
Thank you, Councillor Dudas. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I'm happy to be here today to introduce the Asset Management Plans report and our presenters. This is our first report that we're bringing towards Council as a newly created Department of Infrastructure and Water Services. This is an exciting milestone for myself and my colleagues. Merci à tous d'avoir pris le temps d'être ici et merci de continuer à vous impliquer et à vous investir dans la gestion des actifs, un aspect clé du renouvellement de nos infrastructures. I'd like to pass along my special thanks to Steve Willis, Alain Gontier, Karina Duclos, and Shelley McDonald for their leadership and commitment to the city's comprehensive asset management strategy over the years, and for their time and generosity in bringing me up to speed. A strong vision has taken us to where we are today, and we could not have done it without you. I'd also like to thank the Comprehensive Asset Management Steering Committee and our colleagues across the corporation who have really made this a one city, one team collaborative approach. As Councillor Dudas mentioned, this briefing is in preparation of a report that will be presented to Finance and Economic Development Committee on April 5th, followed by Council on April 13th. Asset management is a priority for our department and the corporation, and we are committed to supporting its ongoing evolution to meet our infrastructure renewal needs. Continuing to invest wisely in our infrastructure will boost economic growth and support thriving communities. Nos résidents, nos entreprises et nos visiteurs s'attendent à pouvoir profiter d'infrastructures qui sont sécuritaires, fiables et abordables partout dans la ville. The Comprehensive Asset Management Program, together with the city's long-range financial plan, have provided the foundation that ensures the city's critical assets are safe and secure, that they remain in a state of good repair while balancing affordability. We are now transitioning to developing updated asset management plans that will meet the new provincial regulations and will broaden the scope and details from previous plans. The asset management plans are also an important partnership with our Finance Services Department, especially as we move into the next term of council as we discuss the city's long-range financial plan and priorities. I'm happy to have with us today Jen Nielsen, the Manager of Asset Management, and Isabel Jasmine, the Deputy City Treasurer, who will speak to these changes and answer any questions you may have. I will now turn it over to Jen and Isabel to take you through the presentation.
Thank you, Tammy. Merci. Good afternoon. Bonjour à tous. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide an overview of the next step in the city's comprehensive asset management program, the core asset management plans, and our next legislative steps. We are setting the roadmap for the next 3 years. This is the city's critical path, and we are aligning it to the new mandatory provincial regulation. Nous allons vous présenter la prochaine étape du programme municipal de gestion intégrale des actifs, les plans de gestion des actifs essentiels et les mesures réglementaires à venir. Nous établissons actuellement la feuille de route de la Ville pour les 3 prochaines années. Ce chemin critique qui doit cadrer avec le nouveau règlement provincial obligatoire. Next slide, please. The city is a leader in asset management practices and associated long-range financial planning. There is new mandatory provincial regulations with specific timelines requiring council to adopt new asset management plans. I will get into more detail throughout the presentation, but these asset management plans will differ from previous plans presented to council. They are required to include new asset classes not previously considered. Furthermore, as level of service expectations have evolved and increased over time, so have replacement costs. As a result, there are significant differences in the work that was completed in the past and the work presented in these reports. It is not an apples-to-apples comparison. It is important to highlight council continues to invest in asset management strategies, and the priority remains keeping critical infrastructure in a state of good repair. There is no immediate need to change the city's current funding model until new service levels are defined in the next version of the asset management plans and associated financial strategy in 2025. Next slide, please. The City of Ottawa delivers services essential to the quality of life and economic growth of the community. The Comprehensive Asset Management Program is an integrated business approach that cuts across various disciplines and service areas across the city. The program provides for the safe delivery of reliable levels of service to our community while remaining affordable. In short, we seek to do the right intervention on the right asset at the right time, Due to Council's investments and continued support, as well as sound asset management practices, most of the city's assets, especially the critical ones, are in good condition. Next slide, please. Before we get into the details, I want to introduce you to a couple of important concepts that will come up throughout the presentation. Firstly, the term condition is used to describe the physical state of an asset. In asset management, we use terms like very good, good, poor, fair, good, very good, good, fair, poor, and very poor to describe an asset's condition. Level of service indicates how an organization will leverage its assets to meet customer expectations and includes performance indicators that reflect social, environmental, and economic outcomes. The city considers community level of service statements and connects them back to technical, measurable key performance indicators. Target level of service is used to describe the city's desired outcome or quality of service. Targets include set goals and identification of key performance indicators. State of good repair is used to describe an instance where the physical condition of an asset is not negatively impacting the intended service. In other words, even if assets are showing signs of deterioration, through maintenance and targeted interventions, the service is being provided at an acceptable level. This means that a highly used or critical asset may need a higher degree of investment or attention than a less used or less critical asset. Earlier in our asset management journey, we were focused on condition as a first step. You may recall the state of the asset reports in 2012 and 2017. As the city has matured its asset management practice, and in this current phase, we are transitioning to a level of service focus, which considers condition and goes beyond to include service outcomes. As we move forward, we will be stepping away from the state of the asset report and focusing more on asset management plans. In the future, by 2025, we will consider target levels of service. A couple of other terms that I'll be using frequently today are core and critical. Core is a term that is defined for municipalities within the provincial regulation that we'll speak to shortly. The province defines core infrastructure as municipal infrastructure assets that relate to drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, roads, bridges, and culverts. The roads and bridges fall within the scope of the Transportation Asset Management Plan. Critical infrastructure is infrastructure that is vital to the functioning of the economy and society. For example, in the case of a natural disaster, the critical assets are the ones that we'll be bringing back first. Things like an emergency shelter, basic sanitation, or an important bridge. Although they sound similar, they are not the same. There is, however, significant overlap. For example, an asset that is core but not critical would be a local road. It doesn't mean that it's not important, it just means that it won't be top of the list when we're looking to recover from a significant event. Something that would be both core and critical would be a major wastewater pumping station. It fits the definition of the legislation, and it would has a major impact to service levels to large areas of the city. Something that is critical but not core would be an emergency shelter, for example. So it is definitely critical if you think of what we would need to have a vital and thriving community. However, it does not meet the definition of the legislation. Many of the core assets are also critical. This is a snapshot of the current condition of the city's core infrastructure, which is captured in the first 4 asset management plans. The city uses a 5-level rating scale with very good condition as the top rating. As you can see, the core infrastructure encompasses about 85% of the city's infrastructure and is generally in good condition. Due to council's investments in infrastructure maintenance and renewal, as well as the city's sound asset management practices, most of the city's assets, especially the critical ones, are in good condition. As mentioned, asset condition is just one of several key performance indicators. Asset management has a long, rich history at the City of Ottawa, dating back to amalgamation in 2001. At that time, 11 municipalities came together with a varied quantity and quality of infrastructure data. Over nearly 2 decades, successive councils have proactively taken steps toward establishing a clearer picture of the city's infrastructure assets and their renewal, rehabilitation, and replacement investments necessary to balance service levels, risk, and affordability. The city's current asset management and funding targets were established in 2012 and updated in 2017, with a focus on maintaining the city's critical infrastructure in a state of good repair. In 2012, the city achieved a major asset management milestone, aligning Long-Range Financial Plan 4 and the Comprehensive Asset Management Report. This major milestone included the publication of the first State of the Asset Report, which provided visibility on the condition of the city's infrastructure, as well as the Comprehensive Asset Management Policy, which enshrined Council's commitment to asset management. When we go back and listen to the discussion around the Council table, there was a flavor of a back-to-basics approach. Some of the critical infrastructure was not performing as well as expected, and the emphasis was put on prioritizing the city's critical infrastructure with the goal of keeping it in a state of good repair. Similar to today, affordability was top of mind. One other thing that I'd like to point out is the language around enhancements. The recommended plan provides an ability to implement some service enhancements as defined in city corporate plans when cost-effective to do so. In 2017, staff brought forward and Council approved Long-Range Financial Plan 5 and a Comprehensive Asset Management Update. This update built on the foundation set in 2012. The analysis showed that the level of investment required to maintain critical infrastructure in a state of good repair exceeded funding levels at that time. Long-Range Financial Plan 5 presented a strategy by which the annual funding gap would be closed. We are still on track with that plan. Staff also brought forward the second edition of the State of the Asset Report and presented its first Strategic Asset Management Plan, which is a document that identifies the services that the city provides, the assets used to support them, and the organization's ability to deliver on its asset management objectives. In 2021, staff brought forward a Comprehensive Asset Management Update that included the updated CAM policy and introduced the Asset Management Plan Framework, which lays the foundations for today's discussion. The key focus of our current strategy is keeping our critical infrastructure in a state of good repair. With successive budgets, the city has been increasing its capital investments to align with long-range financial plans. With that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Isabel Jasmine to walk us through some of the details.
Thanks, Jen. The graphs on the next two slides clearly show that the city is on track with the current long-range financial plans. This graph represents the rate-funded long-range financial plan, with the gray bars representing the increased annual funding each year and the dotted line representing the target funding level required to maintain critical assets in a state of good repair. We achieved the target funding level in 2023. The blue bars show the capital funding envelope distributed each year, with a large increase required in 2023 and 2024. The capital investment needs on the rate side vary each year, and so we simply vary the funding envelope to match those needs, redistributing to years where the need exceeds the target while staying within affordable levels overall. We are also on track with our long-range financial plan for tax-supported assets, which includes not only transportation assets, but also other assets such as facilities. We've been increasing our base funding for capital renewal each year and are on track to address the annual funding gap by 2026. The dotted line shows the funding needed identified in 2017 of $195 million annually, which was an increase from the previous long-range financial plan in 2012. You can see from this graph how far we have come in the last 10 years. The blue bars show the increase in base funding each year, increasing from $81 million in 2013 to $158 million in 2022. The funding was supplemented by one-time federal gas tax funding of $58 million received in 2019 and allocated over 3 years, while we redirected the 1% infrastructure tax to the transit tax base funding over those 3 years to make up for the loss of the doubling of the provincial gas tax. The orange bar shows the additional $39 million in debt that was added in 2022 to help us catch up on the overall funding need. Based on Council's current asset plans and commitment to maintain critical assets in a state of good repair, there is no immediate concern or need to change this plan. Per the current plans, the funding gap is addressed in 2026, but we will also have an updated long-range financial plan and financing strategy developed before that time in 2024 to align with the Transportation Master Plan, Infrastructure Master Plan, and the revised asset plans. It is also worth noting that the city has been successful in receiving funding from other levels of government to offset costs and/or advance the renewal of key infrastructure assets. The city will continue to leverage these external funding opportunities wherever possible and advocate for more.
Merci, Isabelle. In 2018, the province introduced a new regulation with the goal of helping municipalities improve their asset management practice. The regulation builds on the progress municipalities have made while bringing consistency and standardization to asset management policy and plans to help spread best practices throughout the sector and enable collection of comparable data. The city has a well-established asset management program. Therefore, the approach only needs to shift slightly to align to the mandatory regulation and timelines. These asset management plans are building on the city's transparency and accountability. They are the next steps on the asset management journey. The regulation identifies a focus on core infrastructure, whereas the city's focus has been on critical infrastructure. As we think back to the difference between the provincially defined core assets and what we consider to be critical assets, it's important to note that critical assets exist in all of our asset groups, not just within our core assets. Our long-range financial plan identifies maintaining all critical assets in a state of good repair, not just those that fall within the core bucket. Phase 1 is a baseline assessment of what it would cost to maintain all assets in their current state with no change in level of service for the next 10 years. There is no affordability lens. By July 1st of 2022, the provincial regulations require council to formally adopt the core asset management plans for drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and transportation. As per the provincial regulation, the remaining asset management plans, including solid waste, transit, parks, recreation and culture, social services, fire, paramedics, police, bylaw, libraries, corporate services, green space and urban forestry, require formal adoption by 2024. Though the deadline is imposed by the province for the other asset management plans, what is included in that bucket is defined by the city in the strategic asset management plan. In phase 2, by July 1st of 2025, all asset management plans will be updated to include a target level of service. This work involves consultation to understand community priorities and application of an affordability lens. The information from the asset management plans will also help support long-term planning and strategy for how the city manages its assets and investments into the future. The new regulation has caused the city to slightly shift its approach. The asset management plans consider the cost to maintain all assets, which differs from our current financial strategy, which is to keep critical infrastructure in a state of good repair. It includes a larger number of assets. In some cases, it's double the number of assets considered. There are no affordability strategies. It is a baseline assessment. It includes the cost of maintaining all of the city-owned infrastructure assets in their present state with no changes to level of service for the next 10 years. It does not represent a funding requirement. There is no immediate need to change the current funding model until new service levels are defined in the next version of the asset management plans, which are due in 2025. Calculations are based on current information. Let's take a look at how the numbers shape up, keeping in mind that this is not an apples to apples comparison. For drinking water and wastewater services, preliminary costs are well aligned to the current long-range financial plan. Future investments will be required to address the wave of renewal needs for infrastructure built in the post-war era, beyond the 10-year horizon. For stormwater and transportation, the preliminary costs exceed the current long-range financial plan by $579 million and $1.1 billion, respectively, over a 10-year period. As a reminder, there is no immediate need to change the current funding model until new service levels are defined in the next version of the asset management plans, which are due in 2025. I'll provide some more detail around the differences on the next slide. For the Stormwater Asset Management Plan, in 2016, Council approved improved billing structure for stormwater to create a fairer and more sustainable system for its residents. Funding was previously combined with the sewer surcharge and now have a dedicated stormwater fee and funding source. Long Range Financial Plan 2017 was the first plan specifically for stormwater services, and the estimation of infrastructure needs has evolved since then. The infrastructure that supports stormwater is a mix of hard infrastructure and natural infrastructure. Data is continually improving as natural features begin to be recognized as infrastructure that supports our stormwater systems. What we need from stormwater assets is evolving in the context of climate change, as we expect to see more frequent and more extreme rainfall events. For the Transportation Asset Management Plan, the biggest difference is really the difference between core and critical. The established Comprehensive Asset Management Strategy and Long Range Financial Plan prioritize critical infrastructure, emphasizing the renewal of arterial and collector roads with fewer investments on local roads, balancing affordability and risk. Since the province requires that all core infrastructure be considered, all local roads are part of the calculation. The provincially mandated first edition Transportation Asset Management Plan is a preliminary estimate based on sustaining the current condition of all of the city's assets for the next 10 years. Since 2017, the city has experienced significant changes in expected levels of service. Policies such as complete streets and accessibility have increased, have affected the cost of doing replacements, and the overall cost has increased as a result. Climate change and public demand is driving the need for more active transportation infrastructure like sidewalks and bike lanes. This is not a unique challenge. Like most older cities that are also large, Ottawa is challenged by a lack of long-term predictable funding to complement municipal resources and by expectations of service levels as they relate to asset needs. Here are our next steps. The provincial regulations require council to formally adopt the asset management plans for drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and transportation by July 1st of 2022. As we discussed today, these documents provide a baseline snapshot as we enter into the future phases of the process. Per provincial regulation, the remaining asset management plans, including solid waste, transit, parks, recreation and culture, social services, fire, paramedics, police, bylaw, libraries, corporate services, green space, and urban forestry, require formal adoption by 2024. Council will consider all asset management plans with updated service levels, along with updated financial strategies that will consider affordability. Community input is integral to the successful development of revised comprehensive asset management plans. Robust public and stakeholder engagement will be completed throughout the development of the new plans. The new legislation is about establishing consistency and transparency across all municipalities in the way we report on and capture assets. Council is still responsible for establishing our infrastructure goals, level of service, and affordability targets. The legislation allows for decision makers to have transparent information on a wider group of assets to aid in making those decisions. La nouvelle mesure législative vise à assurer l'uniformité et la transparence dans la façon dont toutes les municipalités déclarent et présentent les actifs. Le Conseil demeure responsable de l'établissement de nos objectifs en matière d'infrastructure ainsi que de nos cibles relativement au niveau de service et à l'abordabilité. La mesure législative permettra de fournir aux décideurs des renseignements transparents sur un grand nombre d'actifs pour les aider à rendre leurs décisions. Asset management helps the city to plan for its future in a sustainable way. This is the next step in a long-term conversation, now further guided by this legislation. Working together, our goal is to ensure adequate commitment and resources to protect and preserve the city's infrastructure investments. Thank you for your continued support as we navigate the next steps together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen, Tammy, Isabel. J'invitais maintenant les conseillers et les conseillères et leurs représentants à poser leurs questions. I will now open the floor to questions from councillors and the representatives. We'll be doing it by using the raise hand function so that you can let me know you have a desire to ask a question. We'll go through everyone for first questions. You can ask a follow-up question, And then if time permits, we can go through another round. Lorsque la période de questions sera terminée, nous prendrons une pause de 5 minutes avant le début des points de presse. So once the question and answer period has concluded, we will then take a 5-minute break before the media availability. Councillor Eglai. Are we able to unmute the councillor?
There we go. Sorry about that. On the slide, I think it was maybe the 3rd or 4th slide, there was a breakdown of core versus critical, and it looked like drinking water was not in the critical category, which I find a little bit odd. So I'm wondering if staff could speak to the issue of drinking water and where it fits into the priorities.
Thank you. So critical infrastructure does include a lot of the drinking water assets, as well as many of the wastewater and stormwater assets as well. In the transportation category, there's a bit more variability, but there is an enormous overlap between core and critical. So core is really defined by the province, and critical is defined by the city for ourselves based on our risk management approach.
So even though the slide didn't show drinking water in critical, in fact, it is one of the things we consider critical at the city.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you for that.
Wonderful question, Councillor. Are there any other councillors or the representatives that have any questions? Okay, well, wonderful. Seeing that there are no further questions at this time, I do appreciate everyone taking a Friday afternoon to come and listen to city staff. Thank you all for being here. Oh, I see Media Relations has their hand up. I'm suspecting that's a...
Hi, Councillor. I just wanted to let you know that the reporters also do not have any questions.
Oh, well, this is a wonderful TGIF gift, I suppose, to all of us. Thank you all so much for attending. It's important that we talk about these investments in our infrastructure and know what is coming before committee and council. So have a wonderful Friday and bon fin de semaine. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Councillor.